The Defiant lurches as another explosion rocks the nearby frigate ENS Dauntless. Ilara grips her command chair tighter, watching as the smaller vessel's shields flicker and fail. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Riza, frantically works his console. Captain, Dauntless reports critical systems failure. They're venting atmosphere on 3 decks. Ilara makes the decision instantly. Move us between Dauntless and those crystal ships. Lieutenant Torres, divert auxiliary power to forward shields. The bridge crew exchanges glances. It's a risky maneuver that puts their own vessel directly in the line of fire. But no one questions the order. The Defiant surges forward, its engine straining as it positions itself as a shield for the crippled frigate. Broadcast on all frequencies, Ilara commands, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. This is Captain Ilara Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have attacked a peaceful settlement without provocation. Cease fire immediately and withdraw from this system. The response comes not as words, but as another barrage of energy weapons that slam into the Defiant's reinforced shields. The bridge lights flicker, and damage reports flood in from all sections. They're not interested in talking, Captain, Torres says grimly, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. Ilara's eyes narrowed as she studies the tactical display. The crystalline ships move with disturbing precision, their formation shifting like a single organism. They're methodical, emotionless in their destruction, as they continue dismantling what remains of Titan colony. Status of Dauntless, she demands. They've managed to seal the breaches. Emergency systems are holding, but they can't take another hit, Reza reports. Through the view screen, Ilara watches as a small fleet of civilian vessels attempts to flee Titan, racing toward the safety of Earth. The Vraxian ships immediately adjust their formation, moving to intercept the refugees. No, Ilara whispers, then with more force. No, target the lead Vraxian vessel. All weapons, full spread. Captain, our weapons barely dent their hull, the weapons officer protests. I don't need to destroy them. I just need their attention. Ilara rises from her chair, standing tall despite the ship shuddering beneath her feet. Fire everything we have. The Defiant unleashes its arsenal, a desperate fusillade that streaks across space toward the alien fleet. As predicted, the weapons do minimal damage, but the Vraxians pause their pursuit of the civilian ships, turning their attention back to the Earth warship that dares to challenge them. That's right, Ilara murmurs. Focus on us. She opens a channel to the fleet. All vessels with functioning engines form up on the Defiant. Defensive pattern Omega. We're buying those civilians time to escape. What remains of Earth's outmatched defense force rallies around the Defiant, creating a barrier between the refugees and their pursuers. On her private channel, Ilara sends a message to Earth Command. This is Captain Chen. Titan is lost. Civilian evacuation underway. Request immediate reinforcements and tell them to bring everything they have. These things won't stop at Titan. As the Vraxian ships bear down on the defensive line, Ilara addresses her crew one last time. We hold this line. Every minute we survive is another minute those civilians get closer to safety. This is what we signed up for. This is what we trained for. She pauses, looking at each face on her bridge. This is our home, and we will make them regret ever coming here. The first of the crystal ships breaks through the defensive screen, its weapons charging for what could be a killing blow to the Defiant. Ilara doesn't flinch. Instead, she gives the order that will come to define humanity's response to the invasion. All ships, advance. We don't run from our home. Admiral Zhang's proposal sends ripples of murmurs through the emergency summit. Operation Thunderclap isn't just daring, it borders on suicidal. The plan calls for a direct assault on the Vraxian beachhead, utilizing what little they've learned about the alien sensory vulnerabilities. You can't be serious. General Rivera objects, rising to her feet. Our remaining fleet is at 30% strength. We'd be throwing away lives for nothing. Zhang's cybernetic eye whirs as it focuses on her. And how many more lives will we lose waiting? Every day they entrench around Saturn gives them another day to study us, to prepare for the push to Earth. The holographic display in the center of the room shifts, showing the latest satellite footage of the Vraxian operations around Titan's remains. The aliens have constructed massive refineries, processing the colony's infrastructure, and horrifically, its organic remains. Scientists theorize they're extracting elements needed to sustain their crystalline biology. Dr. Okafor clears his throat, drawing attention back to his findings. There's something else you should see. He gestures, and the display changes to show a neural activity comparison between human emotional states and Vraxian sensory readings. When we experience strong emotions, particularly rage, fear, and protectiveness, we emit patterns the Vraxians can detect. Based on captured communications, they find these emissions disturbing. Disturbing how? Jom demands. Their crystalline structures actually resonate uncomfortably in response. Think of it like exposing a crystal glass to its resonant frequency. Push hard enough, and it shatters. Zhang's human eye narrows. You're suggesting we weaponize our emotions. I'm suggesting they already see our emotions as weapons. Okafor corrects. The question is whether we can amplify the effect. The summit's attention shifts to Dr. Samira Patel, head of the Experimental Weapons Division. She's been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the proceedings, but now stands, activating her own data stream to the main display. We've been working on something, she begins, bringing up schematics for a device that merges human neural interface technology with elements of Vraxian design. We call it an emotional broadcaster. It's theoretical, but based on Dr. Okafor's findings, it could amplify human emotional signatures to levels that would severely disrupt Vraxian sensory systems. How theoretical? Zhang asks. We have a prototype, but to be effective, we'd need to mount it on fighters that can get close enough to Vraxian ships. The effect diminishes with distance. General Rivera shakes her head. No pilot could function effectively while experiencing emotions strong enough to power such a device. The psychological trauma alone. I have volunteers, Zhang interrupts. People who lost family on Titan. They're willing to channel their grief if it means striking back. A heavy silence falls over the room. The ethical implications are staggering, but so is the alternative, waiting for the Vraxians to finish their preparations and move on Earth. President Quan, who has been quietly observing the discussion, finally speaks. How quickly can these broadcasters be produced? Dr. Patel. With emergency protocols and global resources, 2 weeks for the first squadron's worth. Quan nods slowly, the weight of the decision visible in the new lines on her face. We have intelligence suggesting the Vraxians will be ready to move on Mars in approximately 3 weeks. That gives us a narrow window. She looks around the room, meeting each leader's eyes. I am authorizing Operation Thunderclap with Dr. Patel's modifications. Admiral Zhang will command. As the summit erupts in both support and objection, Zhang approaches Dr. Okafor privately. You didn't tell them everything, did you? He asks quietly. Okafor hesitates. No. I didn't mention that the Vraxians seem particularly sensitive to one specific emotional signature, the protective rage of a parent defending their child. The neural patterns are unique and apparently devastating to their sensory systems. Zhang's expression darkens. Then find me pilots who are parents who lost children on Titan. That's incredibly specific targeting of psychological trauma, Okafor protests. This is war, Doctor. Zhang replies, his voice hollow. And they chose the battlefield when they targeted our children. Rusty runs his fingers along the neural interface nodes lining the interior of the Banshee's cockpit. Each one is designed to sync with the pilot's limbic system, channeling emotions directly into the crystalline amplifiers salvaged from Vraxian wreckage. It's dangerous, experimental, and likely to cause neurological damage with prolonged use. Rusty doesn't care. The simulations show a 40% chance of pilot seizure during peak output, Dr. Patel warns, checking diagnostics on her tablet. And we have no data on long-term effects. Not planning on living long-term, Doc, Rusty replies with a half-smile that doesn't reach his eyes. None of us in the squadron are. Behind them, the hangar's massive doors slide open as the remaining 11 modified fighters are wheeled in. Each has been customized based on its pilot's psychological profile, the crystalline components arranged to maximize emotional resonance specific to that individual. Commander Valquez approaches with a data tablet. Your squadron assignments came through. You've got quite the collection of misfits. Rusty scans the list, recognizing several names. Captain Maya Wong, who lost her wife and daughter on Titan. Lieutenant Dmitry Petrov, whose entire engineering team died when the Vraxians hit the orbital shipyard. Ensign Kai Jackson, barely 22, who watched his parents' transport get vaporized while he was safely aboard the Defiant. They're not misfits, Rusty says quietly. They're exactly who we need. Valquez studies him with narrowed eyes. Your psych evaluation was borderline, Keegan. You shouldn't even be cleared for standard duty, let alone this suicide run. And yet here I am. Rusty closes the Banshee's cockpit, the neural interfaces glowing softly in the dim light. Because nobody else has logged more hours with the salvage tech than me. That's because you broke every security protocol to study it. Valquez counters, but there's no real anger in her voice anymore. Just resignation. Dr. Patel intervenes, pulling up combat simulations on the main display. The squadron will deploy in a modified Delta formation. Each Banshee is calibrated to broadcast a different emotional frequency, creating what we're calling a cacophony effect. In theory, it should overwhelm Vraxian sensory systems completely. In theory, Valquez mutters. Rusty ignores the pessimism, focusing instead on the newly arrived pilots gathering around their assigned fighters. They move with the careful precision of people carrying invisible weight. Grief, rage, survivor's guilt. Most have the 1,000-yard stare he recognizes from his own reflection. He approaches Captain Wong, who stands motionless before her Banshee. Unlike the others, she hasn't bothered to glance at the technical specifications or simulator results. They told me your ship is broadcasting parental protection instincts, Rusty says by way of greeting. Said it's the frequency that hurts them the most. Wong doesn't look at him, her eyes fixed on the fighter. My daughter was 6. She wanted to be a pilot. Her voice is flat, drained of emotion, saving it all for when it matters. Will this hurt them? Really hurt them? Rusty nods slowly. Everything we've seen suggests it'll be like setting off a bomb inside their sensory systems. Good. For the first time, Wong turns to face him, and the cold fury in her eyes makes even Rusty step back. I want to be in the first wave. Later, as the squadron gathers for final briefing, Admiral Zhang himself arrives unannounced. The aging officer looks over the 12 pilots, Earth's last desperate gambit, and something like pride flickers across his weathered face. You'll launch in 18 hours, he announces without preamble. Mars Orbital Defense is already engaged with the vanguard of the Vraxian fleet. Your target is their command vessel. He hesitates, then adds more softly, I won't insult you with platitudes about heroism or sacrifice. You know what's at stake, but I will say this. What you feel, what you've lost, it isn't weakness. It's the most powerful weapon humanity has ever wielded. As the Admiral leaves, Rusty climbs atop a maintenance crate, looking over his squadron. Check your interfaces, run your pre-flights, then get some rest. Tomorrow, we teach these crystal bastards why you never, ever attack a human's home. The 12 Banshees streak through Mars' thin atmosphere, their hulls glowing red-hot from the violent entry. Rusty leads the formation, his neural interface buzzing against his skull as the emotional broadcaster warms up. Banshee Squadron, sound off, he commands, voice steady despite the G-forces crushing him against his seat. One by one, his pilots respond, their voices a mixture of grim determination and barely controlled fury. Last comes Captain Wong's calm acknowledgement. Banshee 7, ready to broadcast. Ahead, the Vraxian fleet hangs in orbit like a constellation of deadly stars. Their crystalline ships reflect the ruddy light of Mars, beautiful and terrible. The main force has already breached the orbital defense platforms, methodically destroying Earth's outmatched defenders. "Remember your training," Rusty says as they approach engagement range. "Don't fight your emotions, channel them. The interface amplifies what you feel. Make it count." On the bridge of the EN's Defiant, Captain Ilara Chen watches the small squadron approach the vastly larger alien armada. Status of Banshee Squadron. "All units reporting optimal function, Captain." Torres replies. "Emotional broadcasters powering up. Reading significant neural activity." Ilara's grip tightens on the command chair. "All fleet vessels, prepare to provide covering fire on my mark. Those fighters need to get close enough for their broadcasters to work." The remaining Earth ships move into formation, preparing for what could well be their final engagement. The Defiance weapons officer calls out, "Vraxian vessels altering course." "They've detected the Banshees." Ilara nods grimly. "They took the bait. All ships, fire everything you've got. Create a corridor for our fighters." The space around Mars erupts in weapons fire as Earth's remaining fleet unleashes its arsenal. The barrage is barely effective against Vraxian shields, but it creates the distraction Rusty's squadron needs. They've opened a path, Rusty tells his pilots. Full thrust. Broadcasting begins in 30 seconds. The Banshees accelerate to attack speed, their engines leaving blue-white contrails against the blackness of space. As they close on the alien formation, Rusty activates his neural interface. Broadcasters online. Now. The effect is immediate and dramatic. Each fighter emits visible waves of energy that ripple outward, carrying concentrated human emotional signatures directly into the Vraxian sensory systems. Rusty's own broadcaster channels pure rage, the burning fury he's carried since watching Titan die. His vision blurs as the interface draws deeper on his emotional centers, amplifying his hatred thousandfold. Captain Wong's Banshee emits pulses of a different frequency, the primal, fierce protectiveness of a parent. Her face contorts in a silent scream as the interface forces her to relive the moment she learned of her daughter's death, channeling that agony into a weapon. The effect on the Vraxian ships is immediate. The perfect crystalline formations begin to fracture, ships veering wildly off course as their navigational systems overload. Some smaller vessels actually crack along their hulls, leaking a luminescent fluid into space. Through the haze of pain, Rusty spots their primary target, the command vessel at the center of the Vraxian formation. It's massive, easily 20 times the size of the Defiant, its crystalline structure more complex than the others. "Banshee 7, he gasps into his comm. "Form up on me. We're going for the big one." Wong's fighter slides into position beside him, her broadcaster synchronizing with his, to create a harmonic pattern that cuts through the command vessel's defenses like a knife through butter. "This is for my daughter." Wong's voice comes through, strained and breaking. Her Banshee accelerates past safety limits, heading straight for a vulnerability in the command ship structure. From the Defiant, Ilara watches in awe as the Vraxian command vessel begins to fracture along multiple fault lines, its crystalline structure vibrating visibly. "It's working," she whispers, then louder to her crew. "It's actually working." Across the Vraxian fleet, chaos spreads as ship after ship loses cohesion, their perfect formation dissolving into disarray. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens execute a full retreat, abandoning their Mars operation entirely. The victory comes at a terrible cost. Of the 12 Banshees that entered battle, only 7 remain, their pilots neurologically drained, many suffering seizures from the interface feedback. But they've accomplished what seemed impossible. They've driven back the seemingly invincible enemy. As the Vraxian fleet retreats toward Jupiter, Rusty's battered Banshee limps back to the Defiant, his consciousness fading in and out, his last coherent thought before medical teams rush him from the cockpit. They can bleed. They can fear. We can win this. Dr. Marcus Okafor stares at the holographic model floating before him, transfixed by the implications, the neural patterns of Earth's dolphins, and the encoded message from the Vraxian luminary pulse in perfect synchronicity. The evidence undeniable. It can't be coincidence, he mutters, reaching for his comm unit. Get me Admiral Zhang and Dr. Nguyen immediately. Priority Alpha. Within the hour, the secure bunker beneath Geneva fills with Earth's leadership. President Quan arrives last, her face drawn with exhaustion after days of coordinating global defense efforts. This better be significant, Doctor, she says, taking her seat at the head of the table. We have less than 60 hours before the Vraxian ultimatum expires. Dr. Okafor stands, steadying his trembling hands. Madam President, distinguished colleagues, I believe I've identified the singers the Vraxians demand we surrender. He activates the holographic display. They're not human. They're dolphins. A murmur of confusion ripples through the room. Admiral Zhang leans forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focuses on the display. You're telling me this entire invasion is about fish. Cetaceans, Dr. Lydia Nguyen corrects automatically. The marine biologist had been summoned directly from her research facility in Auckland. And if Dr. Okafor is correct, they're far more than what we thought. Okafor nods gratefully at his colleague. The neural frequencies dolphins produce when communicating are virtually identical to the patterns we've observed in Vraxian sensory outputs. When the luminary referred to singers who nearly destroy their homeworld, they meant a species with the same neural architecture as our dolphins. President Quan's expression remained skeptical. You're suggesting Earth's dolphins are what? Alien refugees. I'm suggesting it's possible their ancestors were. Okafor clarifies. Cetacean evolution on Earth goes back approximately 50 million years. If an aquatic, intelligent species similar to dolphins fled to prehistoric Earth, they could have interbred with or guided the evolution of Earth's proto-cetaceans. Dr. Nguyen finishes, excitement overtaking her scientific reserve. My team has documented anomalies in dolphin brain development for years, neural structures that seem almost artificially enhanced compared to their evolutionary predecessors. Admiral Zhang cuts through the scientific speculation. And the Vraxians want us to hand them over for what? Revenge for a war that happened millions of years ago. Fear, Okafor says simply. The message indicates the singers nearly destroyed the Vraxian homeworld. Whatever these ancient cetaceans did, the Vraxians are still terrified of them, or of any species that might harbor their knowledge. The implication settles heavily over the room. President Quan breaks the silence. We cannot and will not surrender an Earth species to genocide, regardless of their origins. The question is, how does this information help us? Dr. Nguyen leans forward. If dolphins share neural architecture with these ancient singers, they might retain knowledge of Vraxian vulnerabilities, perhaps encoded in their songs or social behaviors. A long shot, Zhang says dismissively. Do you have a better idea, Admiral? Quan challenges. Our emotional broadcasting technology bought us time, but the Vraxians are already adapting their shielding. We need something more fundamental. The discussion is interrupted as a lieutenant bursts into the room. Madam President, we're receiving another transmission from the Vraxian fleet. The holographic display shifts, revealing the crystalline form of the luminary. Its message is brief but chilling. Your resistance indicates complicity with the singers. We have accelerated our timetable. Extinction protocols commence in 24 hours. As the transmission ends, alarms blare throughout the facility. The tactical officer's voice comes through with barely contained panic. The Vraxian fleet has left Jupiter orbit. They're on a direct course for Earth. President Quan rises, her decision made. Dr. Nguyen, you have 24 hours to establish meaningful communication with the dolphins. Dr. Okafor, coordinate with her team. Find whatever knowledge they might have about Vraxian weaknesses. She turns to Admiral Zhang. Prepare all remaining forces. We make our stand at Earth. As the room erupts into frantic activity, Dr. Nguyen pulls Okafor aside. There's a specific dolphin at our facility. We call him Echo. He's different from the others. More aware. If any of them retain ancestral memories of the Vraxians, it will be him. What makes you so sure? Okafor asks. Nguyen hesitates, because he's been drawing something with his snout in the sand at the bottom of his tank. The same pattern, over and over. She passes Okafor her tablet, displaying an underwater photograph. Okafor's breath catches. The pattern is unmistakable, a perfect diagram of a Vraxian crystalline ship. The Auckland Marine Research Facility transforms overnight into a military installation. Armed guards patrol the perimeters while scientists and engineers work feverishly to modify Dr. Nguyen's neural interface for two-way communication with Echo. Captain Ilara Chen arrives by hypersonic transport, still wearing the rumpled uniform she had on during the Mars engagement. The Defiant orbits above, undergoing emergency repairs. "Show me this dolphin," she demands, following Dr. Nguyen to the massive central tank. Echo waits at the viewing panel, his sleek gray form unnervingly still in the water, unlike the other dolphins that swim playfully around him. Echo studies the humans with evident intelligence. "He's been expecting us," Dr. Nguyen says quietly. Ilara raises an eyebrow. "That's anthropomorphizing." "Is it?" Nguyen challenges. "Watch." She approaches the glass and draws a simple shape with her finger, a circle with a line through it. Echo immediately responds, mimicking the motion with his snout against the glass from the other side, then adding a second line to create a cross. He understands symbolic communication. Nguyen explains. That's beyond normal dolphin intelligence, even accounting for their considerable cognitive abilities. Dr. Okafor joins them, wheeling a cart bearing the modified neural interface. The equipment is ready. We've calibrated it based on Echo's specific brainwave patterns. Will it hurt him? Ilara asks, surprising herself with the concern. We don't think so, Nguyen responds. But we've never attempted two-way neural communication with a non-human species before. Echo clicks and whistles, circling excitedly as technicians lower the interface apparatus into the water. The device resembles a lightweight helmet, designed to fit comfortably over the dolphin's melon, the organ they use for echolocation. He's volunteering, Nguyen says with wonder. He understands what we're trying to do. As the interface activates, the facility's main screens come alive with a kaleidoscope of images, sounds, and sensations. Echo's thoughts translated into human comprehensible form. Initially chaotic, the feed gradually resolves into coherent concepts. It's working. Okafor breathes, monitoring the neural patterns. We're getting clear cognitive transfer. The screens display an ancient ocean world, vast, beautiful, with crystal formations rising from the depths like underwater mountains. Echo's ancestors lived there in harmony with the crystals, using their songs to shape and communicate with the sentient formations. Then, the images shift to show another species, the early Vraxians, harvesting the crystals destructively, disrupting the delicate ecosystem. War erupted between the singers and the crystal harvesters. The singers discovered that their harmonic vocalizations could shatter Vraxian technology and even their physical forms when precisely modulated. They weren't trying to destroy the Vraxian homeworld, Nguyen translates, watching the images flow. They were defending their own ocean ecosystem that the Vraxians were destroying. The story continues. The Vraxians developed weapons that poisoned the oceans, forcing the singers to flee across space. A small group found primitive Earth, with its promising oceans and early marine life. They merged with Earth's proto-cetaceans, passing down certain genetic memories and neural architectures while adapting to their new home. The harmonic frequencies, Okafor says suddenly. Echo is showing us exactly which sonic patterns disrupt Vraxian crystalline structures most effectively. Engineers rush to record and analyze the precise frequencies Echo demonstrates. The patterns are complex, beyond human vocal range, but perfectly reproducible with technology. This is what we needed, Ilara says, already contacting the Defiant. We can modify our broadcasting technology to incorporate these harmonic patterns. As the information transfers, Echo suddenly projects a new image. A specific formation of Vraxian ships surrounding a central command vessel with a distinctive crystalline architecture. That's their current fleet configuration. Ilara recognizes immediately. How could he know that? Ancestral memory wouldn't include current tactical information. Okafor agrees, puzzled. Echo clicks insistently, and the neural interface translates his thoughts. The singers maintained a quantum connection across vast distances through harmonics. Some vestige of that connection still exists in dolphins, allowing Echo to perceive distant Vraxian movements through their crystalline resonance. He's been monitoring them, Nguyen whispers. All this time, he's been listening to their movements through some kind of quantum harmonic connection we don't understand. The implications are staggering, but there's no time to fully explore them. Earth has less than 18 hours before the Vraxian fleet arrives. Ilara opens a channel to Admiral Zhang. We have it, sir. Specific harmonic frequencies that directly disrupt Vraxian crystalline structures. We need to reconfigure all broadcasting technology immediately. As engineers rush to implement the new frequencies, Echo projects one final, crucial piece of information: the location of the luminary within the command ship. The Vraxian leader occupies a central chamber, a perfect crystalline sphere at the heart of the vessel. If we can deliver a concentrated harmonic burst directly to that chamber, Okafor theorizes, we might be able to incapacitate their entire command structure. A surgical strike, Ilara nods, understanding immediately. We'd need to get a broadcasting device inside the command ship itself. Echo clicks one last time before disconnecting from the interface. The translation appears on screen with perfect clarity. I have shown you how to defend your home. Now you must defend mine too. As the dolphin swims away to rejoin his pod, Ilara turns to Dr. Nguyen. We never knew we were protecting refugees, ancient refugees who've been part of Earth's ecosystem for millions of years. Does that change anything? Nguyen asks. Ilara's expression hardens with resolve. No, Earth is their home now. And we defend our home. All of it. Rusty Keegan should be dead. The medical staff had been explicit. Another neural interface connection would cause catastrophic brain damage. His neurologist had shown him the scans. Bright, angry spots of damage throughout his temporal lobe from the Mars engagement. None of that matters now as he stares at the modified amplifier device in the Defiance lab. The spherical apparatus gleams under the harsh lights, its surface embedded with both Vraxian crystal fragments and components based on Echo's harmonic technology. It's ready, Dr. Patil says, not meeting his eyes. She knows what using it means. How long will I have once I activate it? Rusty asks, running his fingers over the device's control panel. 30 seconds at most before the neural feedback becomes irreversible. She hesitates. Lieutenant, there has to be another way. A remote detonation. Won't work, Rusty finishes for her. The harmonic frequency has to be precisely calibrated at the moment of broadcast. We need a human brain in the loop. He doesn't add what they both know, that his brain, already damaged from the previous broadcasting, is uniquely attuned to the task. The Defiant shudders as another Vraxian blast strikes its shields. Outside the viewports, Earth hangs like a blue marble against the blackness, partially obscured by the raging battle. The combined Earth fleet fights with desperate intensity, but the outcome seems inevitable. Even with the new harmonic frequencies disrupting Vraxian systems, they're simply outnumbered. Captain Chen enters the lab, her uniform singed from an electrical fire on the bridge. The boarding team is assembled in Launch Bay 3. Are you sure about this, Keegan? No better options, Captain. Rusty secures the device in its specialized carrying case. Your job is to get us close enough to board their command ship. My team will handle the rest. The strike team consists of 7 volunteers, all veterans of the Mars campaign, all with neural interface experience. They gather in silence around the assault shuttle, checking weapons that they know will be largely ineffective against Vraxian physiology. Their real weapon is the device Rusty carries. The plan is simple, Rusty tells them as they prepare for launch. We breach through the access point identified by Echo, fight our way to the central chamber, and deploy the device. Once activated, we have 30 seconds to clear the blast radius. No one mentions that 30 seconds won't be enough time. This is a one-way mission. For Earth, Lieutenant Dmitry Petrov says simply, extending his fist to the center of their circle. The others join in, touching fists in a solemn pact. For everyone who calls it home, Rusty finishes. The assault shuttle launches into chaos. The space around Earth flashes with weapons fire as the Defiant creates a narrow corridor through the Vraxian formation. Emergency thrusters strain as the shuttle weaves through crystalline debris and energy beams. Approaching breach point, the pilot announces, her voice tight with concentration. Brace for impact in 3, 2, 1. The shuttle crashes through the command ship's outer layer, the specialized hull breaching technology, enabling them to penetrate where conventional weapons cannot. Alarms blare as the team deploys into the crystalline corridors of the alien vessel. The interior is disorienting, angles that seem to shift, surfaces that pulse with internal light. The team advances methodically, encountering surprisingly little resistance at first. They weren't expecting the direct boarding action, Petrov observes, too confident in their defenses. That changes as they approach the central sections. Vraxian security drones, floating crystalline constructs that emit paralyzing energy fields, converge from connecting corridors. The fight becomes desperate, human weapons proving minimally effective against the crystalline entities. The team is reduced to 5 by the time they reach the approach to the central chamber. Then 4. Then 3. Each fallen human buying precious meters of advance with their sacrifice. A massive barrier blocks the final corridor, a sheet of living crystal that pulses with awareness. Petrov detonates their remaining breaching charges, creating a gap barely large enough for one person. "I'll hold them off," he tells Rusty, nodding toward the Vraxian reinforcements approaching from behind. "Complete the mission." Rusty hesitates for only a second before clasping his comrade's shoulder. No words are necessary. Squeezing through the breach with the device, Rusty emerges into a vast spherical chamber that seems to extend impossibly in all directions. At its center hovers the luminary, a being of pure living crystal that pulses with internal light, more complex and beautiful than any Vraxian Rusty has encountered. "You should not have come here, human." The luminary's thoughts pierce directly into Rusty's mind, bringing a trickle of blood from his ears. Rusty staggers forward, every step requiring immense effort as the luminary's mental pressure increases. "You shouldn't have come to our system," he gasps in return. "The singers are an abomination that nearly destroyed our world. They must be eradicated, along with any species that harbors them." "Those singers have been part of Earth for 50 million years, Rusty responds, fighting to stay conscious as he activates the device. "They're family now." The amplifier powers up with a high-pitched whine, its crystals resonating as it connects with Rusty's already damaged neural pathways. Pain explodes behind his eyes, but he embraces it, channeling his emotions, rage at the destruction of Titan, fierce protectiveness of Earth, and something new, the harmonic patterns provided by Echo. Patterns that speak of oceans and family across millions of years of shared evolution. The device emits visible waves of energy that ripple outward, a perfect fusion of human emotion and dolphin harmonics. The roar, the luminary's crystalline form vibrates, facets cracking under the assault. "What is this?" the alien demands, its mental voice fracturing. Through a haze of agony, Rusty smiles bloodily. "This is what happens when you threaten a human's home." His consciousness fades as the amplifier draws deeper on his fading neural energy, and everyone in it. The roar builds to impossible levels, resonating through the command ship and beyond, transmitted through the crystalline network to the entire Vraxian fleet. Throughout their formation, Ships vibrate, crack, and shatter, the destruction spreading like a wave. In Earth orbit, Captain Chen shields her eyes as the Vraxian command ship fractures, splintering into a million glittering fragments that rain down like stars. The remaining Vraxian vessels lose cohesion almost simultaneously, their perfect formation dissolving into sparkling debris. He did it. Torres whispers beside her. They actually did it. Chen nods silently, watching the remnants of the Vraxian fleet drift harmlessly away from Earth. The victory feels hollow knowing the cost. Rusty and his team, along with countless others who gave everything to defend their home. What no one expects is the small shuttle that emerges from the crystalline debris 20 minutes later, broadcasting on emergency frequencies. Inside, barely conscious and bleeding from eyes and ears, Lieutenant James Rusty Keegan clutches the spent amplifier device like a child. His first words upon being brought aboard the Defiant: "Did it work? Is Earth safe?" "Yes," Captain Chen tells him, her voice thick with emotion. "Everyone is safe. You're home." 3 months after what historians already call the Roar, the neutral space station Geneva orbits at the L1 point between Earth and the Moon. Originally designed as a scientific outpost, it has been hastily repurposed for the most significant diplomatic event in human history. Lieutenant James Keegan, now Commander Keegan by field promotion, adjusts his dress uniform uncomfortably. The regenerated neural tissue in his brain still causes occasional migraines, a constant reminder of his encounter with the luminary. "Stop fidgeting," Captain Chen murmurs beside him. "You look fine." "I hate dress uniforms," Rusty complains. "Remind me why I'm here. I'm a mechanic, not a diplomat." "You're here because you're the only human who's directly communicated with the luminary, and because President Quan insisted." The delegation chamber hushes as the doors slide open. The luminary enters, its crystalline form now contained within a specialized environmental suit that mutes its natural resonance. What remains of the once mighty Vraxian fleet, 3 badly damaged ships, orbits defensively at the edge of the solar system. Beside the luminary floats an unexpected sight, a large spherical water tank mounted on a gravity-neutral platform. Inside, Echo the dolphin swims lazy circles, neural interface nodes attached to his melon. "This is unprecedented," Chen whispers to Rusty. "Dolphins at the negotiating table." President Quan steps forward, extending formal greetings to both the luminary and Echo. The neural translators hum quietly, converting human speech, Vraxian resonance, and dolphin clicks into mutually understandable communication. "We gather here to forge a new understanding between our species," Quan begins. "The conflict that brought us to this point was built on misunderstandings thousands of millennia in the making." The luminary's crystalline form shifts, facets catching the light in patterns that the humans have learned to recognize as a form of expression. "The singers destroy our ancestral homeworld's ecological balance. When we detected their neural signature on your planet, we assumed you were their weapons, not their protectors." Echo clicks rapidly, the translator conveying his response. "Our ancestors sought only to defend their ocean ecosystem from exploitation. When that failed, they fled rather than continue a war that would destroy both species." The negotiations proceed with surprising civility, given the recent hostilities. The dolphins, through Echo as representative, reveal that they had retained awareness of their ancestors' origins, though in a form more like cultural memory than historical record. They had been watching humanity evolve, waiting until humans reached sufficient technological advancement to communicate meaningfully with them. "You were preparing us to help defend against the Vraxians," Chen realizes aloud. "Your selective breeding programs with humans, the increasingly complex communication attempts, it wasn't just friendship. You were grooming us as allies." Echo's response is simple. "We chose coexistence over dominance. We chose to share Earth rather than control it. When the time came, we hoped humanity would choose the same." The luminary absorbs this information with what humans have learned to interpret as contemplation. For millennia, We have lived in fear of the singers returning to finish what we believe they started. We built our entire civilization around defense against their harmonics. And in doing so, President Kwan observes, you became exactly what you feared, conquerors who destroy other worlds. The formal treaty takes shape over the following days. Boundaries established, reparations for Titan outlined, and most importantly, recognition of Earth's dolphins as a sovereign species under human protection. The Vraxians will withdraw completely from the solar system, establishing an automated early warning system at its edge that will alert both species to any approaching vessels. On the final day of negotiations, after the formal documents are signed, Rusty finds himself alone with the luminary in the station's observation deck. Earth hangs beautiful and blue through the viewport. Commander Keegan. The luminary's translated voice emerges from speakers, far less intrusive than its direct mental communication. I wish to speak with you privately. Rusty tenses instinctively. Why me? Because you are willing to die to protect your home and all who dwell within it. This concept remains difficult for my species to fully comprehend. What's difficult about it? You protect what you love. The luminary's form shifts in what Rusty has come to recognize as its equivalent of a thoughtful tilt of the head. Love is not a concept in Vraxian experience. The closest approximation we have is beneficial symbiosis. Rusty can't help but laugh. That explains a lot about your species. Indeed, we evolved from crystalline structures that achieved consciousness through complex resonance patterns. We do not experience emotion as you do. The luminary pauses. Yet when you activated the device, the roar, as your people call it, I experienced something new. What was that? I believe humans would call it empathy. For a moment, I understood what it meant to love something more than oneself. The admission hangs between them, profound in its simplicity. Rusty turns to stare out at Earth, thinking of all it contains, humans, dolphins, countless other species that call it home. Maybe that's the lesson in all this, he says finally. Home isn't just a place. It's not even just your own species. It's everything you're willing to die to protect. The luminary's crystalline form pulses once, slowly. Your species is young, impulsive, and often irrational. But you understand something we have forgotten in our millions of years of evolution. What's that? That diversity, of form, of thought, of emotion, creates strength, not weakness. 6 months later, Rusty stands on a New Zealand beach, watching dolphins leap through waves. His medical discharge from the fleet gave him the freedom to choose his next path, and he's joined Dr. Nguyen's research team, helping develop more sophisticated communication technologies between humans and dolphins. Echo approaches the shore, fixing Rusty with an intelligent eye that seems to recognize him. After their shared experience during the war, Rusty sometimes swears he can sense the dolphin's thoughts even without the neural interface. We did it, didn't we? Rusty says simply. Seg our home. Echo clicks what sounds remarkably like agreement before rejoining his pod. Behind them, a memorial to those lost at Titan reaches skyward. Its structure incorporating both human and Vraxian design elements, a reminder of what was lost and what was gained. Engraved at its base are the words from Captain Chen's address to the United Nations. Earth's greatest strength was never its technology or its weapons. It was our capacity to define home as wherever our loved ones dwell, and to defend that home with everything we have. As the sun sets over the Pacific, Rusty watches the dolphins swimming freely in the waters their ancestors crossed galaxies to find. Earth continues its eternal orbit, carrying its diverse children through space, humans and dolphins, once strangers from different worlds, now family united by a shared home worth roaring to defend.